busco, creo siento. Let's talk about Geek Charming. Let's do it. Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. So a little while ago I did a video where I compared the book that Lemonade Mouth is based off of to its movie and talked about the differences and the similarities, and then I wanted to make that into a series because a lot of DCOMs are based off of books, but then I just never got around to doing another one until today. So today we're going to be talking about Geek Charming by Robin Palmer, and we're going to be comparing that to, obviously, the DCOM. Geek Charming. And I'm really excited because it's been a while since I read Lemonade Mouth, but I still feel like the stories of the book and the movie were pretty similar besides like a few things. Whereas this time around I feel like the book was quite different from the movie, and so I'm really excited to talk about it. We're going to do two sections this time around, so first we'll talk about the characters and how they were different from their movie characters, and then we'll talk about the plot and talk about the things that they kept in and then the things that they kept out or the things that they changed. And so yeah, with all that being said, let's just jump right into it. So starting off with Dylan, she's played by Sarah Hyland in the movie, and I found her to be quite similar to her book counterpart besides like a few minor differences. In the book, she is described as having long blonde hair and blue eyes, although she does say that her hair isn't naturally blonde, and so there's that as well. She's very concerned in the book about her weight, like she's constantly watching what she's eating, and she has this Weight Watchers calculator that she's very obsessed with. And just overall, she's just very self-conscious about her weight, which is quite sad because Josh does mention that she is quite thin, and I personally thought that throughout the book it kind of seemed like it was an insecurity that came sort of a little bit from Asher, because she does say at one point that he doesn't like her everything but the kitchen sink sundaes because he thinks that they'll make her fat, and just things like that I felt like that insecurity probably came from him, but I'm sure that it came from a lot of other things as well. I also found her to be a little bit racist, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word and she was just a bit ignorant, but she talks about how she's like a very well-rounded person because all of her employees are people of color and she has one Asian friend. I don't know, it was just very ignorant behavior that just rubbed me the wrong way whenever she would like bring that up. Also, in comparison to the movie, she's not a very good student. Like, one of the big plot points of the movie is that she's super smart and nobody knows about that. Whereas in the book, I just found her to be a pretty average student. One of the reasons why she wanted to do the movie is so that she could submit that as her college essay because she didn't want to write college essays, and so yeah, she definitely wasn't like super smart like she was in the movie. They also do that trope in the book where like she used to be geeky growing up, like she used to have braces and glasses and was like super awkward, and so it's like a big secret as to like what she used to be when she was little, whereas I found that not really to be as much of a thing in the movie. She also doesn't do the whole French thing like she does in the movie where she just throws in French words and stuff and talks about like how that's her thing. She uses a couple Spanish words sometimes in the book, but that could be because most of her employees are from Spanish speaking countries, and so maybe she just like picked up a few words from them. Or I guess the movie does take place in the States, and a lot of kids in high school take Spanish as their second language, right? I don't know, I'm from Canada and so it's French for me, but I guess that would make sense too if she's been taking Spanish, that she would just like use Spanish words. I don't know, but the French thing was not a thing in the book. And then there's the whole Blossom Queen situation, which first of all is called Leaf Queen in the book. And while it's definitely a thing in the book, like she wants to be Leaf Queen, she wants to be Prom Queen as well because it is their senior year, it's not as much of a driving force as it is in the movie. Like there's no connection with her mom being Leaf Queen and so she wants to be Leaf Queen as well. Like that's really not a thing at all. It's more like she wants to be Leaf Queen and Prom Queen because she's the most popular girl in school and so she feels like she should be those things. And so there really isn't that whole plot line with her mom, and I actually found that to be a nice addition in the movie. So moving on to Josh, I would describe him as being a bit more on the nerdy side as opposed to geeky in the book. He's described as pretty much the same, as having emo, shaggy brown hair, but then of course in the book he has glasses because you can't have a nerdy character without the glasses. And then Dylan describes him as having a Pillsbury Doughboy look, whatever that means. He works at an electronics store in the mall called Goodbyes in the book instead of the cell phone store that he works at in the movie. He's also very obsessed with his immune system throughout the novel. Like he constantly is saying that he was born 3 weeks premature and so he has a weak immune system and so that's why he can't eat certain things or do certain things. But it's clear that it's more of like an insecurity thing for him and an excuse not to do things. Like he's also got this obsession with his inhaler, and so he says that he has asthma, but then you start to see throughout the book that he's really only using his inhaler whenever he's nervous about things. And so it actually made for a really nice plot line between him and Dylan, and how she kind of like helps him kind of get off of the inhaler in a way, to the point where there's this one scene at the end of the book where she's like going through breathing exercises with him and instead of him using his inhaler to cope with things. And so that was actually a really interesting plot line. I really enjoyed that throughout the novel. Now that we've talked about the main characters, we can move on to like the main love interest. So first of all, Amy Lubaloo is quite different from how she's portrayed in the movie. She's not like that hippie rocker girl band type like she is in the movie. She's almost like in the same sort of crowd that Dylan's in. Like in the movie, they kind of portray her as being in a completely different clique altogether, whereas in the book she seemed to kind of have the same friend group. According to Dylan, everybody has a crush on her and she turns heads when she walks into a room. She's also brunette, not blonde, and she's not a vegetarian like she is in the movie. And then Asher, I think I would describe him as being the most book accurate. Like, he was a pretty big jerk in the book as well. He was compared to a Ken doll a lot, and so I would say that the looks were pretty spot on in the movie. I would say the only difference with Asher was that he was a surfer in the book and not a volleyball player. So moving on to each of their main friend groups, Lola and Hannah are Dylan's best friends in the book as well. They are quite similar to how they are in the movie, except for their appearances. Like, Lola was adopted from China, and so she's Chinese. And then Hannah's described as having a red bob, and so she looks quite different in the movie. And then there's Josh's friends, Ari and Steven, who are pretty similar to how they were in the movie. I think the only difference is that Steven was described as having blonde hair in the book, but he was played by Artie from Liv and Maddie, and so he was a redhead, and that was fine with me. And then there's Caitlin, who is not in the book at all. She is strictly movie only. He did have this other friend in the book that was his manager at Goodbyes, but he was kind of a creep. Like, he hit on Dylan one time, and it was really weird, and so I was completely fine with him not being in the movie whatsoever. So now we've talked about the characters, we can move on to the plot, which, like I said earlier, I'm going to be splitting it off into 2 sections. But before we do that, I did want to mention that the book is a young adult novel. I would say it's kind of for like ages 13 and up. Like, it's more like Lemonade Mouth in the fact that it is more mature. There is some sexual references, there's some slight language, and there is some drug and alcohol usage. I thought it made for more of an authentic high school experience with reading it, just in comparison to the DCOM, but it is something to keep in mind if you are going to be reading the book. With all that being said, let's move on to what they kept in. So first of all, the main storyline in the book is the same as the movie. Like, Josh's documentary is the real driving force of the plot in the book as well. The main difference there is that the movie isn't for a film festival, it's for Josh's application to UCLA. And Josh comes up with the idea of having Dylan being the star of his documentary in the same way that he does in the movie. Like, she throws her purse in the fountain and then he goes and saves it for her, and then they make the agreement to do the movie then. But the main difference is that in the book, Dylan doesn't actually want to do the movie at first, and she gives him a fake number. And so this leads to a scene where Josh goes over to Dylan's house in hopes of convincing her to do the movie, but then she's not home, so he ends up talking with her dad. And so it's kind of similar to that one scene in the movie where Dylan comes home to them talking about old movies, except for she comes home to them watching, I think it's baseball, and they're bonding over Neil Diamond and the fact that Josh and his mom are kind of tight on money, which is similar to how Dylan's dad grew up. And so he's actually the one that makes Dylan follow through on her promise to do the movie, and he actually agrees to pay for the movie as well. And then another scene that they kept from the book is the scene where Josh's car breaks down, she twists her ankle, and then he ends up carrying her, and then they end up having a fight and not doing the movie. That was basically the same as in the book, except for the scene took place later at night, and Josh was driving Dylan to Pilates, and the book takes place in LA, and so it was more of a thing to leave her alone on the side of the freeway because it was like not safe. And he actually ends up carrying her bridal style, not piggyback style. But other than that, it was basically the same thing. They get in a fight and end up calling off the movie. And they reconcile in the book as well, but it's quite different from how it's done in the movie. Like, in the movie, it's Dylan who comes to Josh, and she goes and hangs out with Josh and his friends at the movie theater, and that's how she gets him to get back on board with the movie. And there isn't really a scene like that in the book. Like, Josh is the one that comes to Dylan to get her back on board for the movie, and the only scene that comes to mind is one that happens later on where Josh is hanging out with his manager from Goodbyes, and they're at this film festival kind of thing. And then Dylan at this point doesn't have any friends, and so she goes and hangs out with Josh and his friend, and it's kind of like a thing between them that they both know that she's not gonna like this movie, and then that's what happens. She doesn't end up liking the movie. Whereas in the DCOM, Dylan kind of knows more about old movies, or at least knows about the movie that they're seeing and is able to like have a conversation with them about it, whereas that's really not the case for the book. If those two scenes are similar or not, I'm not really sure if they were intentionally similar or not. And then we have the moment where Dylan introduces Josh to the everything but the kitchen sink sundae, which was quite different from how it was portrayed in the movie. In the book, it happens after a frat party that Dylan and her friends are at, and then she gets really drunk, and so Josh ends up taking her home. And then Dylan doesn't like being left home alone, and so she invites him in to introduce him to this everything but the kitchen sink sundae. And then there is this one moment where he finds a picture of Dylan when she was little and kind of more geeky, which I think is kind of similar to the one in the movie where they're talking about her mom being Blossom Queen, but I'm not sure again if that was just a coincidence or if that was supposed to be similar to the scene in the book. Also, the dinner scene in the movie where Josh invites Dylan over for dinner with his mom is from the book as well, and it's basically the same. This is also the moment where Dylan finds out that Josh has a crush on someone, but she doesn't find out who it's on, whereas in the movie, Dylan basically finds out that it's Amy Lubaloo right away. In the book, it's definitely kept a secret for a lot longer because Dylan and Amy are ex-best friends in the book as well. But the reason that they're ex-best friends in the book is quite different from the movie. Like, in the movie, I'm pretty sure that Dylan just says that it was because she didn't want to live in Amy's shadow anymore, whereas in the book, they used to be really good friends, but then the guy that Dylan has a crush on ends up asking Amy out, and Amy says yes and ends up going out with him for a few months, and then Dylan gets upset by that, and so that's the reason why they stopped being friends in the book. And then the last similarity between the two would be the makeover. Dylan decides to give Josh a makeover in both the book and the movie. In the movie, this is something that Dylan already does. Like, she says that she gives advice to fashion victims in the movie, and that's already a thing that she does. Whereas in the book, this is a new thing for her. She comes up with this idea to give people makeovers and stuff. Now we've talked about all of the similarities, let's move on to the things that they changed and kept out of the movie altogether. Even though I feel like when we were talking about the similarities, most of them were changed in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, let's move on. So the first thing I wanted to talk about in this section was Dupar's, which is a diner that Josh introduced to Dylan in the book, which ended up being a common hangout spot for them, which really wasn't in the movie at all. There's one scene in the movie where Dylan is talking about the cats and dogs stuff, where Josh is filming them in a diner, which I thought might have been a callback to Dupar's, but who knows. But it was a really nice little location for them to like hang out and stuff in the book. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit more about Dylan and Asher's relationship in the book, because while it was quite similar in the movie, there were some slight differences. Like in the movie, every time I saw Asher talking to Dylan, I just thought to myself, like, this would not be happening in the book, because Asher wouldn't even say 2 words to Dylan basically throughout the book. The relationship was basically described by Dylan as like they were together for 2 years and the first year was good and they were like really close, making out all the time, whereas the last year they weren't anymore. Like Asher basically stopped caring about Dylan altogether, and so she would always excuse this behavior by saying like it's not healthy for people in a relationship to be hanging out all the time, but it was clear that she was quite hurt by the fact that Asher didn't like her anymore, basically. And then they do break up in the book as well, but it's quite different from how it's done in the movie. Like in the book, Josh and Dylan don't really go through a big change like they do in the movie. Like, yeah, Josh gets this whole makeover, but he doesn't change who he is after he gets the makeover. Like, he's still friends with his friends and he's still the same person on the inside. And it's the same with Dylan. Like, she basically stays the same throughout the book, besides the fact that she now has like this really good friend in Josh. And so the breakup doesn't happen because she's like turned into a geek and like Asher's afraid that she like has a crush on Josh or anything. It's more of like just a long time coming sort of thing. Like they weren't talking for almost a year, and so it just kind of made sense. He also doesn't break up with her in the middle of class by a note. He breaks up with her by inviting her out to frozen yogurt and then breaking up with her there. This is also the part where we find out that Dylan's popularity basically came from Asher. Like once her and Asher break up, nobody really cares about Dylan anymore, which was really sad. There's also this scene where she goes to this Halloween party and really embarrasses herself in front of everybody. That really didn't help with her popularity either, but it was really more the fact that her and Asher were no longer together that people really stopped caring about her. And then another thing I wanted to talk about in this section was the movie showing, because it was quite different from the DCOM as well. Because this movie wasn't for a film festival, there was no like proper screening like there was for the DCOM. Instead, Dylan ends up inviting people over to her house to show them the movie in hopes of gaining her popularity back, except for the fact that they end up accidentally showing the wrong version of the movie. In the book, there is 2 versions of the movie. There's Josh's documentary style version that shows Dylan in a good light, and then there's Steven's final cut of the movie, which just shows Dylan in a terrible light and was described as more of like an MTV reality show kind of style. And so that's the version that accidentally gets shown at the party, and so it just makes everyone hate Dylan even more, and then it makes Dylan and Josh have this fight in front of everybody. It's basically like the fight that they have in the movie, except for it's in front of everybody, and Dylan doesn't let Josh explain the fact that that wasn't his version of the movie. And then just like in the DCOM, Amy is the one that tells Dylan that she saw the wrong version of the movie, and then they have a nice heart-to-heart, and that's how they become friends again. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about, which probably should have been the first thing that I talked about, is the fact that Dylan and Josh do not end up together by the end of the book. They were strictly friends throughout the book, and honestly, I really liked it. Like, there were a couple moments when I was reading the book where I was kind of just like, oh my gosh, when are they gonna get together already? But I feel like I only felt that way because I'm so used to reading like young adult romance novels, and so I'm just constantly waiting for that moment when they get together. And then when it didn't come, I was chill with it. Like, it made sense to me. It was to the point where like by the end of the book, I didn't want them to be together because it just didn't feel right to me, because they were just such good friends. Like, obviously there were moments because they did become so close with one another that people thought they were dating, or at one point Dylan thought that Josh's crush was on her, but overall, like, they were strictly platonic. And I really liked it. Like, I felt like their friendship made the message of the book just that much stronger. And so the book ends with Dylan no longer being in the popular crowd. She's rekindled her friendship with Amy, and so Amy and Josh are now dating, and so she hangs out with Amy and Josh as well as Josh's friends. It also ends with Dylan saying that she's dating someone named Roger, I think his name was. Yeah, she says that she's now dating this guy named Roger, and he's brought up on like the last page of the book. Like, I'm supposed to remember who this Roger person is, but I have no memory of who Roger is. Like, I'm sure it was just some guy that she mentioned earlier on in the book as kind of like a throwaway line, but apparently we were supposed to remember him, but I could not remember him for the life of me. So if anyone else has read the book and could tell me down below if that's who Roger was, or if he was someone more important, that would be great, because I couldn't figure out who he was, and that made me mad. It does kind of suck now though, because when I watch the movie, I don't really ship them anymore like I used to. Like, they used to be one of my favorite Disney Channel ships, but now I watch them and I'm like, It just seems weird to me. Like, I don't really see their chemistry as much as I used to. I mean, it also doesn't help knowing what happened between the actors in real life. For those of you who don't know, I believe the actors did date around the time that they were making this movie, and then I think Sarah Hyland actually ended up having to get a restraining order against the guy that plays Josh. I don't know his name. So that doesn't help either, knowing that, watching this movie. But also, I just personally can't see their chemistry working anymore as a romantic relationship now that I've read the book. But I still do really enjoy the movie. I think it's a lot of fun, and I did really enjoy this book, and I would honestly recommend you to read the book, although I did just spoil basically everything in this video. I still had a lot of fun reading it. But that's all I have to say for today. Let me know down below if you've read Geek Charming or if there's any other DCOM books you want me to read. I already have The Swap. I bought this book so that I could read it. So I could do that one next maybe, but I know a lot of people have also been asking for Avalon High, so let me know down below which book you would like to see next in this series, and maybe I'll do it next. Anyways guys, my name is Caitlin. You can follow me everywhere at caitlovesdisney. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on that bell so you're notified every time I post a new video. But that's all I've said for today. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.